Hi, I'm Jayne from Poppy Patchwork, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this Christmas wall hanging. Now, this Christmas wall hanging has taken me nearly 3 years to complete. I started it in 2020, and you know how it is, you get your Christmas fabric and you think, yes, I'm really enthused, I'm going to get this finished for Christmas. Well, I didn't. And then after Christmas you just don't feel like doing it, do you? And that happened for 2 years. And each year I'd get all enthused just before Christmas, and then I never get it finished. And after Christmas you don't want to do it, do you? So I have finally finished it. So I hope you enjoy this video. Hi, Jayne here from Poppy Patchwork, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Christmas wall hanging. The pattern is by Macawa and it's freely downloadable from their website. I'm going to put a link into the video for you. And when you go onto the website, you'll see that they have 5 patterns. They're all exactly the same. They're just using different fabric collections from 2019. I've decided to use Yuletide, which is the new Christmas fabric collection this year from Macawa. In order to make this Christmas wall hanging, you can find out how much fabric you need by looking inside the instructions. So for this one you need, these are the instructions up here, and you've got the fabrics that they've used for the 5 different patterns. For this one you need 1/8 of 9 different fabrics in the collection. Most fabric shops online will sell you as their smallest amount either a fat quarter or a long quarter, and this is double what the fabric calls for. Now of course you can buy extra and put the leftover fabric in your stash, or I hunted on the web and I found a box of fabrics that were fat eighths. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so Bramble Patch is selling a lovely box of fat eighths in Yuletide. So I've had it delivered and I'm going to open that up today. So this is the lovely box you get from Bramble Patch. It comes with a nice sticker on the front of the box, and then inside we have got the 12 lovely fabrics. Let me tip that back up to the camera. They are so yummy, I cannot wait until I start this project. As well as the fabrics, the fat eighths that you need, you also need 3/4 meter in a background fabric, and I've chosen this lovely speckledy golden spot fabric, and you're going to need 1.5 meters to do the border and the backing. So I've chosen this one to do the border, although I don't have enough to do the backing because I thought I'd put a plain colour on the back of the quilt. So these are the yummy fat eighths from Bramble Patch, and I'm going to take them out of the box, press them and choose which 9 I'm going to use for the project. So I've got the first fat eighth of fabric here. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. And now I'm going to neaten up these edges. I'm going to take the ruler across to it. I'm going to line one of the markings from the ruler along that folded edge, and then with the rotary cutter I'm just going to neaten up those edges. The pattern then calls for a 2-inch strip, so I'm going to turn the fabric round and line that lovely neatened edge up with a 2-inch marking on the ruler, and then I'm going to make my cut to get a 2-inch strip. So now we've got our first 2-inch strip. I'm going to continue to make those 2-inch strips on the 9 fabrics that I've chosen to use. So I've cut my 2-inch strips out of the 9 fabrics that I've chosen, and as well as these strips you need a piece for the tree trunk. I've decided to use this piece for the tree trunk, and you're going to need a piece for the star, so I'm going to use this one for the star. So let me move the strips away. And for the tree trunk you need to cut a piece that is 1.5 by 3 inches long. So I'm just going to fold this in half again, different direction, and I'm going to straighten that edge up. And then I'm going to cut a piece that's 1.5 inches. So lining 1.5 inches against that freshly cut piece of fabric. It has to be 1.5 by 3 inches. So now I need to cut this piece of fabric down to 3 inches. So I'm going to start by straightening this edge. And then turn that round, use that straightened edge and line up 3 inches along that straightened edge. To cut enough fabric for the tree trunk. And now I'm going to cut enough fabric for the star. So I'm going to cut the star out of this fabric. Again, what I want to do is straighten up the edge. I'm just going to fold that and now straighten up this edge. I'm going to open this out and using that straight edge I'm going to find the 5 inches on this square ruler. I've got a bit of a selvage edge along here, so I'm just going to actually measure 5 inches along here and 6 inches down to here, and then cut that back to 5 inches in a moment. So I'm measuring 5 inches along here, so this measurement will be 5 inches. And then I'm going to turn this around and trim this to 5 inches square. So I've got 5 inches down here, 5 inches here. I'm just going to trim that down to 5 inch square. And using this 5 inch square, we're going to applique a star shape at the end of the project at the top of the tree. So I've arranged the strips of fabric in the order in which I want them to appear on the tree. We're going to need 22 strips in total, so I'm just going to keep repeating this order. I've taken a photograph of it just to remind me of the order that I've chosen. Referring to the printed pattern, I'm going to subcut these strips into the sizes shown on the pattern. Again, using the printed pattern, I've cut 4 strips of background fabric and then subcut these as per the instructions on the pattern. So I've subcut the Christmas strips as per the instructions in the pattern, and I've laid them out as a Christmas tree. The next thing is to attach the background fabric to each strip and then to shape it. So I'll show you that next. So I've cut out the Christmas fabrics into their strips, and I've also cut the background fabric into strips. And then, according to the pattern, what you need to do next is sew the background strips onto either end of the Christmas fabric strips. Now, you don't do this with the very longest piece, but you do it with all of the others. So I've got my pile here of background strips, and I'm going to start with the longest Christmas strip, which means I'm going to have to start with the shortest background strip. So if I take that from here, and if you remember, we cut these into pairs. I'm going to place this right sides together, and I'm going to pop a pin in it there. And then on the other side, I'm going to pop the corresponding background fabric piece and pin that. And so we're going to do that with each of the Christmas fabrics. So I've got them all pinned, and now they're ready to go over to the sewing machine. So according to the pattern, each of these strips now needs to be shaped, excluding the bottom and the top strip. So focusing on the internal strips, they all have to measure 2 inches at one end and 1 inch at the other end. And to achieve this, you mark in 1/2 inch from either end of alternate strips. Sounds a bit complicated, so what I've done is I've put a pin in alternate strips, and then the opposite side from the pin is where I'm going to mark the 1/2 inch. On the non-pinned side, we need to make a marking 1/2 inch from each edge. So I've lined the ruler up, and I've placed a mark here and here, which signifies 1/2 inch from each end. So now that we've marked the points on at the end here, that's where we're going to cut to. So each of these strips has to be shaped. So I'm going to cut along the long end from this corner here down to this point here. And then I'm going to flip it and do the other side. So I'm going to repeat that with all of these pieces now. Look at that, my rotary cutter's just broken. So these are all the strips laid out on the table. At the moment I can't fit them all on. They now need to be joined together, so I will sew these together and show you progress as I go along. So what I found when I'm sewing these together is because they are slightly on the bias once you've cut them, it is a little bit stretchy, and these seams get in the way a little bit, so I've pinned them back out of the way. So you can see this one here, I've pinned it so that it's pinned where I want it to lay as we sew across it. So I'm going to see if this works better this time round. So I also lengthened my stitch and I put the walking foot mechanism onto my sewing machine, and that did seem to make it a little bit easier. So now that all the inside pieces have been joined together, the bottom strip needs to just be cut once. So this end here needs to be the wide end and this end needs to be the short end. So we're going to mark 1/2 inch in from this side here only. So we only need to cut this side, not this side. So I'm going to put my pin in here. So that's the side that I want to cut it, and I need to come down 1/2 inch. So first of all I'm going to measure where 1/2 inch is. So that's where 1/2 inch is there. And then that's what we're going to have to cut from here to here. Needs to be 1/2 inch. We're going to cut from here to here just to get that angle on this bottom piece. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and now I'm just going to cut that. So I'm lining the ruler up with the 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to cut to that corner over there. So if I bring the Christmas tree back onto the camera, move that pencil. So hopefully if I get this on shot now. So this is the piece we've just cut. We've got the narrow end here and the wide end here. And when we sew that to the Christmas tree, we'll get a nice straight edge along here. So I'm going to sew that to the bottom of the Christmas tree, and when I've done that, we'll repeat the process at the top of the Christmas tree. So we're at the top of the Christmas tree now, and again we're going to have to make this is the wide end and this is going to be the narrow end. So I'm just going to pop a pin in here, which is approximately 1/2 inch, and now I'm going to measure that. So 1/2 inch is here, and now I'm going to cut that like we did before. So we're going to cut from this corner down to that 1/2 inch marking to shape this piece. Bring that Christmas tree back into shot here. So we've got the wide end here and the narrow end here, and we're now going to sew those together. So now that we've finished the Christmas tree piecing, I am going to refer back to the pattern and cut the remaining background fabric strips. So now we need to cut 2 3 3/4 inch strips and 1 5 3/4 inch strip to finish the Christmas tree panel piece off, and then we're going to cut the border pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim this so that we've got a nice straight edge. So I've got a nice straight edge. I'm just going to turn that round now, ready to start cutting the strips. Now I've got this piece folded in half and half again, so there's 4 layers of fabric there. Just going to refer back to the pattern to see what we need to cut, because I can't remember. So we need 2 3 3/4 inch strips. So that is 3 inches. We need to go to 3 3/4. So I've lined the 3 3/4 line up against that newly cut strip, and we are now going to cut straight across that. We need 2 of these. So that's the first one. And now we need a second one. So another 3 3/4. Now the next one needs to be 5 3/4. So I need to just grab my longer ruler, which is behind the camera. So bear with me one moment. So I don't need this long ruler for its length, but I do for its width. So we need to cut one piece that is 5 3/4. So just turn that ruler around. So there is the 5. We're going up to 5 3/4, which is here. So line that up, and now we're going to cut that. So those 3 pieces are going to be used to finish off the Christmas tree part of the wall hanging, and then I just need to cut some border fabric. So let's see what we need for that. We need to cut 2 3 1/2 inch strips, and then another 2, so 4 3 1/2 inch strips. So it doesn't look as if I've got very much fabric here, so fingers crossed I've got enough. So I'm going to go back to my other ruler, and so we need 4 3 1/2 inch strips, so that's 7, that's 14 in total. Have I got 14 here? No, I've got 9, so let's see how we go. So I'm going to, in fact, I'm not going to cut the border strips off because I might be able to do this more efficiently than in the pattern. So I'll come back to doing that in a moment. So from our leftover strips that we were using to go either side of the Christmas tree strips, we need to cut 1 1/2 inch square. So this currently measures 2 inches, and I'm going to cut it to 1 1/2 inches in this direction. And then I'm going to turn that round. I'm going to level up one side of it, and then I'm going to cut 1 1/2 inches from that levelled side. So now I've got a 1 1/2 inch square, and this needs to be added onto the bottom of our tree trunk. So we've got this 1 1/2 inch square, and we're going to sew it to the bottom of this piece that we've cut for the tree trunk. So we'll go over to the sewing machine and do that now. So I've referred to the pattern, and I've referred to the picture of the pattern, and I don't quite understand the instructions, so I'm probably going to go a little bit off-piste now and make it up myself. So if you look at the picture, we're going to have the tree trunk in the centre of this last piece along the bottom here, and what we need to do is have some background fabric filling the gaps. So this measures about 3 1/2 inches, which is the strip of fabric we cut before, and this measures 12 inches. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces that measure 6 inches by 3 1/2 inches to go either side of this tree trunk, and then sew them onto the tree trunk here. So let me show you the cutting of that. So if you remember, I'd already, no, it wasn't that piece, I trimmed one end. Oh yes, I trimmed the end of the 5 3/4 inch strip, which I think isn't the one we want to use. We want to use one of those 3.5 inch wide strips. So I've got this here. I'm just going to trim the end to get a nice straight edge on that. So I've got to find my ruler. So that is 3 3/4. So I'm going to cut the selvages off, and I'm going to turn that round, and I'm going to cut 6 inch strips. Now there's 2 layers of fabric, so I'm just going to do this once, and I'll have 2 pieces that measure 6 inches long. So I've measured that, I'm going to cut that up. So if I return back to the Christmas tree panel, what we're going to have is the tree trunk here in the middle, and we're going to have one piece sewn on this side and one piece sewn on this side, and then we'll just trim this down, making sure that the tree trunk stays in the middle. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine now, sew these 2 pieces onto the tree trunk piece and show you what that looks like. So I've sewn the tree trunk onto these 2 side pieces, and I just trimmed the bottom to make it all the one length size along here. I have put the halfway point with a pin here, marked the halfway point along this section with a pin, and I've marked the halfway point here as well. So those 2 pins are going to join together to make sure the tree trunk is in the centre. So take these over and matching those pins together, I'll take one of the pins out and place that like that, and then I'll just remove that one from there. I'm going to pin the 2 sides. As you can see, they are a little bit long, and we'll trim that in a moment. So I'll pin that side there, and I'm going to pin this side here, and I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and sew that long piece together. And then I'll show you what it looks like. So I've sewn this onto the bottom, the tree trunk is now on the bottom, and just need to trim these sides. So this red piece of fabric is 12 inches long, so that's what I'm going to trim this bottom piece to. If we pan up through the tree, you can see the edges are not all even, and which means not all the strips are 12 inches long. So I will trim that down, but I'll do that later on once I've put the top piece on, which needs the applique piece. So for now, what I'm going to do is trim this bottom piece so that it lines up with this red piece, which is 12 inches, and then I'm going to show you how to do the applique piece. So I'm lining the ruler up with the edge of this red piece, and I'm making sure it's straight along the bottom here, and I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. So lining that red piece up, making sure it's level with the stitching along this bottom piece here, and then I'm going to cut that to size. Okay, so next is the applique piece, and I'll show you how to do that. So from the 5 3/4 inch strip of fabric, I've cut a piece that is 12.5 inches long. I'm going to pin this to the top of the Christmas tree, and then I'm going to sew that in place. So now that I've sewn that in place, I'm going to trim the sides of the wall hanging and making them all even. So I'm going to show you the wall hanging as it is now. I've trimmed the sides. I don't have a table long enough to have it out on display in my sewing room, so I'm showing you what I can. The next step is to make the side strips for the wall hanging, and after that we'll probably do the borders, and at the very end I'll show you the applique. So before I move on to do those side pieces, I've given it a better press. I've used best press on that, and I've pressed it on my wool mat, and I think it's come up with a much better pressed finish. So in the instructions it says you need to cut a piece that is 30, let me just check, 30.5 inches long. Now I've folded the panel in half, and I've measured that with my tape measure, and as you can see here it is measuring, half of it is measuring 15.5 inches, so double that would be 31 inches. So I've decided to cut strips that are 32 inches long, and then I can trim them to size. So it would be wise to measure your panel before you cut those side strips. If you remember, I was a little bit short of this background fabric, so I've gone back to it, and I've got this smaller piece here is 3 3/4 inches wide, which is what the pattern calls for the side pieces. This one actually measures, when folded in half, 15.5 inches, and the other piece I have left over is from the top of the border, top of the panel. That I can cut down to 3 3/4 inches wide, but again it is 15.5 inches. So whereas I was going to cut them out to 32 inches, I've only got 31 inches, and rather than cut any more fabric from the background fabric, I'm going to cut these to 31 inches, and then maybe just, if I need to, cut a little bit off the panel top and bottom. It wouldn't be very much, and I don't think it will be missed. So that's really just to conserve the fabric that I've got, and the decision would be yours as to whether you want to cut new strips of fabric or be a bit more economical with the fabric. So I've pinned these in place, and actually they are exactly the correct measurement for the length of the panel. I'm going to sew those in place, press them, and let you see what they look like. The instructions now call for the border to be put on, but I actually like to have a little kind of mini border just to frame my quilts before I put the main border on. So as you can see, I have this lovely red mistletoe fabric from the collection that I've placed in between the border and the actual kind of panel with the Christmas tree on it. So I'm going to cut some strips of this red mistletoe fabric. I only want it to be 3/4 inch wide, so it is going to be really quite slim, and so I'm going to cut those and sew that onto the Christmas tree piece first, and then I'll sew the border, the main border, on afterwards. So from those 3 strips of fabrics, we've now got 6 strips that need to be joined together. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take these 2 strips, and I've got the selvage edge here, right sides together with this selvage edge, and I'm just going to place it like this. So we've got the little holes that are in the selvage edges, and we're not going to use those. I'm going to grab my pins here, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew a line, a diagonal line, from here to here. So I'm going to pop a pin in here, and I'm going to pop another pin in here. I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and sew across that way. So once you've sewn that seam, you just need to cut a 1/4 inch away from that seam. So I'm going to line the 1/4 inch line on the ruler up against that stitched line and cut that. And then the next thing we want to do is press those seams open. So with my little roller, seam roller, I'm going to open those seams out, roll that over, turn it over to the right sides, and roll that over again, and then we will cut those dog ears off. So now I've got this long strip for my border frame. I'm going to pin it onto the quilt top. So I'm going to cut the excess off now and pin that onto the other side. So I'm going to take that to the sewing machine, sew it on, and I'll show you what it looks like. So once the seams have been sewn on, I have set the seams with the iron, and then I've pressed those seams. And now I'm just going to cut the little excess amounts of fabric off the ends here. So I'm going to do that on all 4 corners. So now that I've trimmed those edges, I am going to place the remainder of the mini framing fabric on the top and bottom of the panel. So I've pressed those final border mini frames. So I've pressed those mini frames in place now, and we're going to have to cut those. So I want them to be 1/2 inch. So we need to have another 1/4 inch join to that. So that means I'm going to trim these 3/4 inch away from the seam. So I'm going to do that on all 4 sides before I add the main border. So this is the trimmed mini frame, and now we're going to cut the border. So for the border fabric, I bought fabric off the bolt, so it is 42 inches wide. For the length of the wall hanging, you need about 32 inches on both sides and about 20 inches for each top and bottom. So I am going to first of all start by neatening the edges. So I've neatened those edges, and now I'm going to turn the fabric round so that I've got that nice straight edge to work with. And the pattern says that we need to cut strips that are 3.5 inches wide. So there's my ruler lined up there, 3.5 inches. So we're going to cut 3 strips of these, because that I think will be wide enough. If not, I'll have to cut a 4th strip. So let's cut those 3 strips. So I've got those 3 strips, 1 each for the sides, and then hopefully that 3rd strip will be split in half to do the top of the wall hanging. So as we did before, I'm going to pin the border onto that mini frame. And then once it's pinned on, I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. So this is the border that I've sewn on. The quilt is getting bigger and bigger, so I can't really show it to you in full until I've got it up on the wall. But now I'm going to show you how to do the applique star. So for the applique star template, you're going to have to print out the page of the pattern that has the star printed onto this. And then you're going to have to trace that onto a piece of fusible web. So I'm going to use Heat and Bond. Now Heat and Bond has a paper side and a glue side, which is a bit bobbly. So what you're going to do is you need to trace it onto the paper side. To make this a little bit easier, I have a light box here. So I've turned that on to the brightest, and now I can see the star template more easily so that I can trace this. Now if you don't have a light box, you can hold it up to the window and you'll be able to see through that. And actually if you have it on a fairly light background, it's shone through quite easily before I turned my light box on. So now that I've got this light box on and I can see the template shape, I'm going to trace that with a pencil. My on-off switch for my light box is quite sensitive. If I lean on it ever so slightly, it does turn itself off. So I've traced that out. It's pretty good. I mean, if you can take as much care as you want over it. I know that when I come to cut that out and place it onto the fabric, I don't have to be like super accurate, but you know, that's your choice. So I've done that now. I'm going to turn the light box off and I'll show you the next steps. So I've roughly cut out around the star template, and this is the fabric that I'm going to use for the star template. So we need to go over to our ironing board and press the fusible web onto the fabric. So first of all, I'm just going to press the fabric, and then I'm going to turn that over so that the wrong side is up. And then this is my template, and on this side we've got the glue. That's the slightly bobbly side. We're going to place that onto the wrong side of our fabric, and then we're going to hold the iron down for about a count of a long 6. I'm just going to move it over and make sure all of it, the glue has melted everywhere. So now that fabric star piece has adhered to the wrong side of the fabric. And what we now need to do is cut out exactly on the lines of that star template. So now we have the star template. If I flip it over, we can see it in the fabric that we've chosen. So now I've brought the quilt top back onto the ironing board, and I've placed the star where I'd like to have it on the design. I think you can have it close to the tree or far away from the tree, but I think I'm just going to have it, I think the pattern has it there, but I'm going to have it just slightly away from the tree, like so. So what you need to do is you need to turn it back over, and now you need to peel that paper off from the back of the template. I don't know if you can see very well there, but this is quite glossy on this side with the glue. So we're going to pop it back. When you're happy with where you want your star, then you need to bring your iron back and once again hold the iron over the star to melt the glue. When I move the iron, I'm not moving it with much force, so it's just gliding over the star. So that star is now set in place, but we do need to sew it in place now. So when I sew, applique onto anything, I always like to put a piece of stitch and tear behind this. So on this side of the fabric, I'm just going to pin some stitch and tear before I start sewing that star on. So I'll go and get some stitch and tear and show you what to do. So I've got some stitch and tear, and I'm going to place that on the wrong side of the quilt behind where the star has been placed. So I'm just going to pin that on the wrong side. Pin it in the corners so when I come to doing the sewing, it's not going to get in my way. So that's where the star is, that's the point of the star, and yes, I've got stitch and tear all the way, and I can now take that over to the sewing machine. So I've done some practice stitches for appliquing around the star. I've got 2 satin stitches, one slightly wider than the other, and 2 blanket stitches. One has a single stitch and the other has double stitches for the blanket stitch. So I think I'm going to use the satin stitch, the closer of the 2 that I've got on this sample piece. So to do the satin stitch, I've taken the swing, the length of the stitch quite narrow, and left the swing to be the standard swings. But it's important to practice your stitch before you choose which one you're going to do on your actual piece. So once I have sewn that in place, I can now remove the stitch and tear from the wrong side of the wall hanging. And it's called stitch and tear because now we simply tear. So we've torn that away from the around the edge of the star, and now we just need to cut a little piece in the centre of the star. You have to be careful that you don't cut through your fabric. You really don't want to do that at this stage. So I'm just making a really small cut, and then I'm going to tear the rest of it away. I think that's pretty much all of it torn away. I think there's a little bit here. There we go. So that is the applique star on top of the tree. So I will give it a final press and then I will show you the wall hanging in full. The only thing left to do now is quilt as desired, bind and hang your quilt up for the season ahead.